Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to welcome to Pure London. I hope you're having a very fantastic morning so far and have exciting plans for this afternoon. I am delighted to be joined by Ed Burstell, who doesn't need much introduction to most of you, I'm quite sure, a rock star of the retail world, whose CV reads like a list of every department store you should go visit in America, and of course, us Brits know him very well for his time at Liberty London. Ed, welcome back to London. How's your trip so far?
Thank you. It's been great. Yeah, it's great. It's great being back.
Good.
Yes.
We'd like to have you here. Have you got any shops on your that you want to visit while you're here?
Actually, I have the next 3 days are blocked out for nothing but shopping. So I'm gonna do area by area. And I'm gonna do central, and I'm gonna do west, and I'm gonna do east.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The full tour.
A lot.
Excellent. So I would like to start by just talking about you and how you got into retail, how you fell in love with retail, and your journey. You started on the floor at Macy's, if I'm correct in thinking so.
It was completely by accident. I had graduated school with an accounting degree that I never used, and I needed a job, and it was October. So I went to Macy's and I applied for a job, and there were 2 openings. You could work in Santa Land, where you had to dress up as a reindeer, or you could be one of those annoying spritzers on the main floor. And I said, well, there's really no dignity in either one of them, so I decided to be a fragrance sprayer, and I found out that I was really good at selling. And I never looked back. I got a job as an assistant buyer in a buying office. Eventually I was promoted to a buyer at Bloomingdale's. From Bloomingdale's I went to Henri Bendel, where they gave me beauty, they gave me accessories, they gave me ready to wear for the first time. I stayed there and eventually was the general manager. But it was one of the smaller stores in New York. So when Bergdorf Goodman called, I was like, okay, it's Bergdorf Goodman. Yeah. And there were 2 people that, because they did so much volume, they had to split up the store. So I had one half, and somebody else had the other half. But it was just really, really corporate, and I can operate corporately, but it's not my favorite thing. So when the dream job called, when Liberty called and said, would you be interested in talking with us? I was on a buying trip. I was in Paris, and I jumped on the first train I could.
And there you oversaw double-digit growth. You really put Liberty back on the map.
And it was great for almost a decade.
Yeah. What are some of your fondest memories from your time at Liberty?
Well, I had a lot of learnings to do when I got there, and that's a piece of advice. I guess I got there and I thought I knew everything. So in the beginning I made mistakes. Like which brands to carry, how to re-merchandise the store, what to spend marketing money on. So like one of my biggest takeaways is listen to your team and don't think you know everything. Because I had an amazing team. Maxine Grocott did visual, Kate Brindley did communications, Yasmin Sewell was there doing fashion. So it was kind of, I should have listened more in the beginning.
It must have been quite a culture shock as well. I mean, as you say, Bergdorf being very corporate, Liberty, less corporate. But also,
not at all.
But also UK and US. How did you find that?
I know. I keep on saying the same thing. I mean, we speak the same language and we say completely different things. So it was a bit of a shock those first 6 to 12 months. But an even bigger shock was after I had been there 2.5 years, the store got sold. and it went from private ownership to private equity. And that's a completely different picture because they are known for being hard drivers of business.
How did that affect things?
But they kind of knew what they didn't know. So the first 6 months we were like this. And then I was like, all right, leave me alone because I know what I'm doing. And they did, and they stepped back, and the business really started to take off.
Yeah, why do you think Liberty, has been so successful for a long time?
It was like this. I mean, I look back at the history, and at certain periods of time, it really hit, and then it sort of fell out of favor, and then it hit again, and I don't think there was enough continuity in the merchandise or enough variety, So in the 60s they hit because they had the microfloral fabric, but it didn't really change by the time you got to the 80s, so it was waiting around like that. So I think it was more about putting more freshness back into the assortment, more variety, and because I'm American, I'm not afraid to talk about it. I don't know if that's a British trait or it kind of was. Like, okay, we've got it. Let's. Then I was like, no, it doesn't need to be a secret.
And you talked about, realizing early on that you had, good skills at being a salesperson. Do you still consider yourself a salesperson now that you are, now more a consultant for retail?
I'm always a shopkeeper. That's something that, I think if you don't understand merchandise and you don't want to talk to customers, don't be in this business.
And what do you love about retail?
I love the fact that it changes, and you need to change with it to keep it fresh. I mean, there's cycle after cycle of newness, but you can't get distracted by all of that as well. I mean, you have to have a vision, and you have to have an eye on how you put all of the assortments together. And it's really tricky when you have a full line department store and everything from top to bottom needs to look like it was bought with one eye. Because sometimes I go into stores and I'm like the home floor looks like, completely different than the ready-to-wear floor, looks completely different than the accessory floor. And I think that's a mistake.
And what do you think are the skills needed to succeed in retail today?
It's a little different today because there are two parts to it. There's the intuitive part and then there's the numbers part. And what I think is happening, particularly in American retailing, is the numbers part is winning. And that is a shame because you don't take risks then. You look at the business that you're doing, you look how to anniversary that business, you look what you can get from your vendors rather than promoting them as individual new finds. And that's happening more and more in America. And it's particularly a problem with smaller brands that want exposure in America. Because before there used to be what I call, you could be cool by association. Like if you were in a store, let's say like Barney's, everybody ran there to see what was there. Every other brand ran there and every other store ran there. And if you were in Barney's, you got the stamp of approval. Everyone else, all the rest of the stores would call you, all the rest of the stores would pursue you. Now with Barney's gone, there really hasn't been anyone that has stepped up to take that place.
Do you think that's, we've seen a lot of department stores in particular have been a slightly troubled sector for a while. Do you think there is still a place for department stores? Will we see a new Barney's in America?
I hope so. There are a few people that still are trying to do that, but the landscape in America has changed so much that if you're a small brand looking at America, you have to understand a couple things. You have to understand that because America is geographically vast, your first impression is that you're going to make a ton of money. I just have to get in there, I'm going to make a ton of money. Well, no large American department store is going to do your social media or do PR for you. And if you're not making noise where you're currently from, they're not even going to know how to find you. And that's the reality of getting into America today. Like if you were working if I was running a big American department store, with thousands of brands, I would be looking for the brands that are making some noise, let's say, in London or in the UK.
I know you've called yourself a storyteller before, like you like to tell the stories in retail as things. Do you think that seems to tie with what you're saying as well, that the brands have to be storytellers as well as the retailers? Do you think that is the way forward?
I think it is the way forward, because if a large department store picks you up in America, they're going to tell your story through their lens. And the one thing that you don't want to give up is your storytelling narrative. You always need to protect that. So what you need to do is get the merchandising right, but then make sure that your website and all of your social media reflects the way that you want to be projected. You don't, like, if you go to Saks, it's gonna look like Saks. Or you go to Neiman's, it's gonna look like Neiman's. And you may not want to tell the story that way. So I'm a big advocate for doing as much as you can direct. For very practical reasons, when you go direct, you keep all your margin. If you go through a department store, you're giving up your margin and you're giving up your narrative.
Yeah, is there still a space for purely wholesale brands who maybe invest less in that sort of brand storytelling? Is that going to be a thing of the past?
I don't think so. I think everyone just has to be clever and have patience. Like if you're a brand out of London or out of the UK, what are you doing to up your UK profile first? And then when you approach America or approach the US, how does that change? Because an American consumer, they don't want to read. It's like this. If you don't get them right away, it's like a window. You walk by a window. If you don't get them in the first 15 seconds, and it has to be in a language that they understand. It's sharp bullet points. That's what they absorb. So you have to be willing to change the way you tell your story in America.
And so you left Liberty in 2017, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Why did you decide that was the time to leave?
I loved it. I loved the time there. But I knew it was time to leave when I woke up one day and I didn't have fresh ideas to take the business further. And I think that there's an expiration date sometimes on people's creativity. And if you look at the people that are running large chains in America, these people have been in those positions 20 and 30 years, and there is a reason why the store looks old, and the assortment looks tired, because I am a big believer that you have a certain period of time where you are fresh, and then it's time to take on it's time to take on something new.
When you feel too a part of the furniture.
Yeah, exactly.
It's time for a refurb. And did you specifically want to go back to America, or would you have been open to opportunities in the UK as well? Because you left for Neiman Marcus, yes?
I had a relationship with the CEO. I had worked with him before. He had a very interesting position for me because he recognized that Neiman Marcus sort of had run out of those ideas. And he goes, would you please join? And I was over what they called product experience and innovation. So how do you make the assortments sing? And how does it all hang together? And then how does it come alive in a store? And that was very attractive to me, even though the job was in Dallas. Oh my God, Dallas. It is neither London or New York.
Yeah, so how was the experience in the job, other than being in Dallas?
Mm-hmm. It was interesting to work in something so big again. And it was like pushing a really heavy rock up a steep hill. They were not used to change. And what they desperately needed was change.
Slightly more of that corporate structure again, and resistance to it.
Yeah.
And how is it now being self-employed, being free agent?
I actually love it. And at the start of the pandemic, a friend that I had known for forever, we decided to form an entity together. And what we do now is help smaller brands find a path into America. Connecting them with the right people that will understand first their sensibility in terms of the merchandise, also managing their expectations on what to, and also giving them advice to actually save them money. Because if you have a standard relationship with a department store, you lose a big piece of your margin, and you have a lot of other hidden costs. You have marketing costs that if you want to be part of this, it's cost you this. You have staffing costs if you want to be part of this. So by the time you're done with all of that, it's an awful lot of work.
And how are you finding that brands are responding to that? I think a lot of small brands, it's like their dream to be stocked in like a big department store, but then, as you say, it can often be hit with realities of the costs and the
Sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. And I can only give them what I think is the right advice for right now. And if you have the patience, it will work.
And are there any brands that you're currently working with or have worked with that you're really excited about, that you think are doing really well?
There are a few, and there's two in the beauty space. There's two in the ready-to-wear space. It's also one of the reasons I'm here this week, because I have a week full of meetings. I've had a lot of inquiries, obviously, from the UK, two clothing brands, one accessory brand, and a really, really interesting fragrance brand. So it's kind of across multiple categories.
Yeah. In the fashion space, what do you think department stores are looking for? Like, what stands out to them in the American market at the moment?
They're looking to be more profitable. So they're looking less at innovative design. And that's the difference between America and the UK. In America, you're taught to be very, very commercial. In the UK, you're taught to be very, very creative. So if you take a very, very creative collection and show it in America, they may not understand it. So before you go and spend all that money doing that, and spending money on PR and the rest of that, I would probably hire a merchandiser, someone who could come in and evaluate your collection. Yeah, someone that's like an ex-buyer from a store who's going to look at it and say, this is great, but it's not balanced. It's all tops, there's no bottoms, it's all outerwear, where are the knits, and get the collection to a commercial point before showing it to an American.
And do you think that brands are seeing America as more of an opportunity post-Brexit?
Yes and no, because with the pandemic, everyone in America got hit, and every store is still struggling to do the volume that they did in 2019. So I think it's going to be a while before they start taking those chances again, and because right now they're playing it safe.
Yeah, so you still think that like post-pandemic recovery is still not quite there yet?
Not quite. Yeah. I think it's going to be a few more seasons.
Interesting. And I assume you're still maybe keeping one eye on the retail market in the UK as well, from where you are. Obviously a lot has changed since you left. How do you see things here?
I've been back a number of times, and it's good. It's good to see the people back. I mean, I was on Oxford Street yesterday, and it was shoulder to shoulder. I mean, I literally I had to wait online to get into Selfridges. I mean, that is completely different than America. That level of tourism has not returned to America, but you can tell that they are here. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity for someone to take advantage of that, and not just in London, but across the entire country. And I do think there are stores that will take chances, like a Liberty. They do. Harvey Nicks still does, and I would probably target those stores first.
And obviously not only has there been a lot of political change and difficult circumstances and things, but a lot of social change in the last few years as well. How are issues around sustainability, around diversity and inclusion, those sorts of things impacting the retail market in America?
The one thing the pandemic showed me or taught me was just how quickly every age group was adopting Gen Z values. So if we were sitting here 5-10 years ago and we were talking about sustainability, we probably would have been talking about recycling. That's so far from the conversation now, because Gen Z has pushed the conversation to the point where you're talking about a carbon footprint, you're talking about water content, you're talking about biodegradable packaging, and if you're not aware of that and see that coming as this next wave of shoppers grow up, you're going to be lost. The idea of being included, like they grew up that way. They grew up with gay marriage. In America, they grew up with a black president. None of that is, it's not an issue now. And if you're not reacting to that and making sure that your story is genuine, you're going to get called out on it.
And do you think, you say it's not an issue, and I know what you're saying, it's not a debate, I guess, is the way, but it is still an issue. Like there is still more work to be done. Do you think, Where do you think we are? What's still not seeping in?
It seems generational, particularly in America. So you can see the clear divide, generation after generation. And I think the one that's coming up next is the one to watch.
And is that something buyers are looking for in the brands that they're sourcing? Like, are they asking those questions?
They are asking those questions. They should be asking those questions. And they need to scratch the surface a little more on whether or not what they're being told is actually happening. What are the working conditions where you manufacture this? Who is the founder of the company? What do they believe? And what does the company do socially?
Is it in the sort of, you mostly work with kind of luxury department stores. Do you think it's easier or harder for luxury brands and luxury department stores to address these issues?
I think it's easier for luxury brands to do it on their own. But when they're put under the same umbrella with everybody else, then it's up to the store to tell that story.
So for anyone in the audience who might already be operating in the US, what are your kind of tips for expansion in the current climate?
Just make sure that your site is US friendly, and that all of your social media is US friendly, and be patient and go direct as much as you can. Because going direct, you keep all your margin, and you're going to need that money to pay for what you need to do in America. That's a simple equation, So at that point, when you've exhausted going direct, then pick the right partner.
Are there any retailers globally, department stores maybe, who you think are like really leading the way and they are doing everything right now? Like, who's hot to watch?
I do like Selfridges. I like the way that they've pivoted. And they always inject newness, and they always talk about it. And each one of their arms, whether it's here, whether it's in North America, wherever they have the same playbook. And I like that consistency, and I like that consistency over a period of time. I mean, they were talking about water, and pollution, a dozen years ago. It was across all of their front windows on Oxford Street. I mean, they put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and I do like that a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
What are your predictions for the next 5 to 10 years for retail?
In terms of growth, I do think it's going to bounce back. I think it's going to bounce back a little differently, though. I think the people that are going to struggle are the ones that do fast fashion and disposable fashion. The ones that instead of 1 or 2 collections a year have 6 or 8. It's fall, it's spring, it's winter, it's summer, it's resort, it's this. I think the pandemic has left everybody with a mindset that we all love to shop, but we're going to be shopping smarter and better.
And for yourself personally as well, what's on the horizon for you? What do you still left want to do in the retail world?
Oh no, I love what I'm doing now. Yeah. I love finally being in a position where I can be very, very honest with a brand. And because if you're at a store, you have to sell the store, right? I don't have to sell anything anymore, And I also like the fact that I don't have to work with people that I don't want to anymore. That's a big plus.
Brilliant. We still have 15 minutes left or so, but rather than me sitting asking more questions, I'm sure there are some questions in the audience. If anybody would like to ask a question to Ed, I don't know if we have a mic that's roving round at all. Yeah. Yes. Are there microphones to ask questions? Yes, there we go. Sharon's got one there for you.
Thanks. Hi, Ed. My name's Penny. Thanks for taking your time here with us. Would you please expand on how to get my social media American friendly? As you said, it's like, how do I become more American friendly as a brand based in Kenya, trying to break into the market of luxury in North America?
Sure. The first place I would start is by studying some American brands and how they operate. What I find a lot of times, smaller brands when they start, it's not conversational. It's very much like a textbook, you know. And Americans want to be entertained as well, you know. So it has to have a little bit of humor to it. It has to be really, really punchy and very, very much to the point. You have to get your point across in like this much time for an American to look at it, because they're overloaded with everything. And what I would do is make sure it sounds like American English. That's the first thing. Like when someone's coming to America and they say we have a great site, I look on it and I see all they did was press the translate button, and and it just simply dies. It's flat, and you need to make it emotional. When someone looks at some of your things, when they look at some of your posts, or they go on your site, there has to be an emotional connection for them. Or what's the point?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thanks a million. That's awesome. I hadn't thought at all of having to translate from Kenyan British words to what an North American one. It's totally different.
It is.
Totally different. Thanks a million. So glad I came.
Any other questions?
Done?
One over there.
Hello. Hi, Ed. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Gabriel. I own one of the biggest British men's fashion blog. We're working with few partners at the moment in America, but in your expert opinion, because we're going to approach it before the summer, but in your expert opinion, what do you think, or which, I'd say, American city do you think that we should get our inspiration from?
Tell me about the collection.
Well, we haven't decided yet, because we've got a few brands that have approached us, me and my partners. I'm the owner, and I've got a few partners across Europe. But we're going to start working with brands. I'm not too sure if I'm allowed to say, there's way too many cameras, but we can discuss it if you want. But in your opinion, what city do you recommend for us to sort of focus on in America?
In America?
Yeah. Fashion-wise. Men's fashion-wise, anyway.
Men's fashion, you have to go where you're going to get attention. So right away, it's New York and LA. Particularly if you have a streetwear collection, LA. And then you have to look at the other hot spots where you're going to be noticed. Miami for sure. Chicago. I would stay away from Dallas because it's really conservative, unless you have a conservative collection. But I would probably pick Austin. The thing that you should be thinking about also is when you get into those, if you break into those cities, rather than rely on the store to help you, figure out, based on the DNA of whatever brand you're going to represent, how you're going to do an impactful activation that's going to get you noticed. Nobody needs a designer standing next to a rack of clothes. No one cares. Yes. But if you're a perfumer, and you do something, you pop up in a store and you show somebody your technique and how you actually make something like that, that's incredible. If you're working with somebody who's using certain fabrics, where are those fabrics sourced? What's the technique? I mean, when LV puts their artisans on the road, and you get to actually see someone making a piece, or when Chanel puts the people that do all the embellishment on the road, it's a mob scene. And you get attention for that, and you get credit for that, rather than just saying, I'm in Saks.
True, very true.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was
Okay.
that was all I needed. We're going to start with New York, but it might expand further. But the advice you gave was really good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Question at the front here.
Hi Ed, my name
Hello.
is Rebecca Roy, and I was wondering, who do you think is doing well, like on all the levels that you're talking about, on their storytelling, on their sustainability, and are there any British brands that you feel, are having this kind of success right now?
I think Burberry does a good job, and I think it's because they know who they are, and that's their core business, but they're able to keep on reinventing themselves.
Are we excited about Daniel Lee as new creative director?
And I love Joe Malone because they've kept that brand what it always has been about, which is sort of elegant, entertaining. I love Charlotte Tilbury because no matter where she goes, it's all about sort of that. It's all about that Hollywood glamour. I love someone like Erdem because you know an Erdem dress when you see it. And you have to have a consistent vision over time. If the collection one season looks completely different than the collection before and the collection after, you're not going to build a consistent customer base. So if you can keep what you consider your signature going and bring people forward with it, but slowly, you have a much better chance of success.
Do you think British brands still have a prestige on the world stage?
I do. Well, when I was here, I did a lot of work with the London College of Fashion. And but it was complete. Foremost was creativity. And then I came in, and they said, will you speak to the students, work with the students? And, I signed on for several years to do that, and I was the commercial conversation, and I would hope that changes, because a lot of these students were not prepared for what the reality was going to be. And everyone says, oh, Alexander McQueen. Okay, that's 1 in a million. Literally, 1 in a million.
Yeah.
So as long as you're in this, you need to balance that creativity with some financial realities.
So we're great at the creative side. We
Yeah.
still need to work on our commercial viability.
Yeah. Like in America, that's what you're taught. It's got to sell. How does it sell? Here is how do you make it different? But when you put the two of them together, that's magic.
Any more questions from the audience?
No? Thank you.
No? Okay, I think we will wrap up there. I'm sure some of you probably want to grab Ed yourselves individually afterwards. But thank you very much for coming and joining us, and thank you
Thank you.
in particular to Ed.